My brothers and sisters, of all the incredible and shocking statements that Jesus made during his lifetime, I really believe that this one has to be the most amazing of all. In fact, it's so incredible that I don't think we even believe that Jesus really meant it. Maybe it's just a metaphor for something else. Or perhaps it's just a figure of speech or something. But seriously now, whoever believes in me will do the works I do and will do greater ones than these? Is there anyone in this church who can honestly say, I do the works of Jesus, and I do even greater works than his? And yet Jesus declares that whoever believes in him will do just that. And he even puts greater emphasis on it. Amen. Amen, I say to you. But let's back up for just a moment. Take a closer look at the deeper meaning and the implications of what Jesus is saying here in St. John's Gospel account. Remember, this is Jesus' final discourse at the Last Supper, his last formal teaching, as it were, before he returns to his Father. And so he really gets down to the nitty-gritty of his revelation. Remember, sisters and brothers, Jesus not only reveals and teaches the message, but he himself is the message. And so both Jesus' actions and his attitude are just as important as the actual content of that his teaching has. So instead of you and I just skimming the surface of what he said, looking for what he might have meant, let's see if we can discover the deeper meaning by considering Jesus' attitude here. So what kind of a person was Jesus? A healer of broken bodies, broken hearts, compassionate, full of mercy, always ready to forgive, an encourager of people, and a builder of confidence. And most especially, as shown in this particular statement he made, Jesus was a person who was always looking to empower others, even when it meant doing that at his own expense. That is the attitude of Jesus. And that is to be our attitude as well, yours and mine. And let's not forget that that is also the attitude and example given to us by so many of our mothers, whom we honor on this special day, Mother's Day. So let's just look at our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles today. Now, the apostles were already modeling this attitude for us in Jerusalem. When they discerned a need to care for those who were being neglected in the church, what did they do? What was their example? Well, they lifted up and empowered others to do the work that was needed. And Peter begins his teaching by telling us in our second reading today that Jesus is the cornerstone of our spiritual life and our faith. But Peter also tells us that we too are living stones, chosen and precious in the sight of God to be built into a spiritual house. We are that house. You and I, like Jesus, are to be always looking for ways to encourage and to empower others, even when it means doing so at our own expense, even when our efforts are misunderstood, misinterpreted, or even rejected. Let me illustrate this point with a little story. There once were two men, both seriously ill, in the same small room in the hospital. Familiar story today, I imagine. In fact, the room was so small that there was only one small window in it looking out onto the world. One of the men could move somewhat and was allowed once a day to sit up in his bed next to the window. On those occasions, he could look out, which is why his bed was next to the window. But the other man had to spend all his time flat on his back, which is why his bed was not near the window. Now, every afternoon, when the man next to the window was propped up for his hour of treatment, he would pass the time describing to his roommate what he could see outside. From what he described, the window apparently overlooked a park where there was a lake. There were ducks and swans in the lake, and children came to throw them bread and to sail model boats. Young lovers walked hand in hand beneath the trees, and there were flowers and stretches of grass and games of softball. And at the back, behind the ring of trees, was a fine view of the city skyline. All this the man patiently described to his roommate to lift his spirits. He told him how a child nearly fell in the lake and how lovely the girls were in their summer dresses and all kinds of adventuresome things to pass the time away. His roommate could almost feel that he was there in the park. Then one afternoon, a dark thought hit him. Why should the man next to the window have all the pleasure of seeing what was going on? Why should he get the chance? It wasn't fair. He tried to stifle such thoughts, but each day, like Saul's jealousy of David, they became stronger and soured his soul. Something had to change. Well, one night as he lay with his thoughts, staring at the ceiling, the other man suddenly woke up with a start. He coughed and choked and tried to grope for the button that would bring the nurse running. The man watching all this silently managed to push the button just out of reach. In the morning, the nurse found the other man dead and quietly took his body away. As soon as it seemed decent, the man asked if he could be switched to the bed near the window. So they moved him, tucked him in, and made him quite comfortable. The minute they left, he laboriously propped himself up on one elbow and looked out the window. Guess what? It was facing a brick wall. You and I, like Jesus, like the apostles, and like so many of our mothers, and like the man who sacrificed his life in our story, are to be always looking for ways to encourage, to lift up, and to empower others, even if it means doing so at our own expense. If we are to be living stones, letting ourselves be built up into a spiritual house, then you and I must be willing to offer the only spiritual sacrifice that is acceptable to God. And what is that? Well, that is the sacrificing, the surrendering, or the letting go of ourselves to become a healer of broken hearts and broken bodies. To be compassionate and full of mercy, always ready to forgive, an encourager of others, and a builder of confidence, a person who is always looking to empower others, even when it means doing so at our own expense, and it often does. These are the works of Jesus. And Jesus promises us that his disciples, you and I, will do these works and even greater ones than these.